Hello and welcome. My name is Andy Salkeld and this is my Start Competing 40k video series to help people start competing Warhammer 40k tournaments. I started this series with the intent to kind of help people, my friends, kind of overcome the social anxiety of going into a new situation, playing a new and complex game, and to hopefully enable them to have a better time and experience when playing. I myself have struggled with social anxiety, depression for many years. It almost stopped me from going to events, and I'd like to help other people avoid that situation. Today, as part of this series, we're going to talk about the applications that are used within most competitive Warhammer events, and the ones I'm going to mainly focus on are battlescribe and BCP, Best Coast Pairings. So battlescribe is probably the easiest one to do or to talk about in a vacuum, because it is about it's the army list builder. So in this, it's a tool that allows you to build an army list within the rules provided in each codex for an army. It is not an official GW app. There is an official GW 40k app. However, there are various bugs and quirks associated with it, so it hasn't taken off as kind of popular use yet. As at recording, it's September 2022, which is kind of battlescribe is still in full motion. My belief is that the Warhammer 40k app will probably take over maybe around the time of 10th edition's release and so on. battlescribe, it's fairly intuitive. It does have some quirks as to how various things are selected, unselected, what you can and cannot do within it. Takes a bit of time, but it's worthwhile figuring out. I'm not going to go through the details of using it. Just be aware that it is a tool that allows you to produce an output that will be used later on. It is important to note that because it is not a GW app, it requires kind of volunteers to update the data, and therefore it may lag behind the official releases. With the output and the list that is produced, once you import all the details, is worthwhile checking and confirming this against the latest facts, data slate, other rules available in 40k. And if you have any doubts, check with friends and check with a tournament organizer. Say you've used these things, but you're still uncertain, can they have a look at it? Just a way to kind of help make sure that all the data that will be used throughout your games is in the right kind of format and the right spot. And that's battlescribe. So battlescribe will produce an output for the army list you will be playing, and then that will be used in Best Coast Pairings. So BCP, just quickly, both of these have a web app and a phone app. So they can be accessed on the internet or on your phone. Both do have subscription or donation models. I have not subscribed or donated to either yet, so I can only speak for what is freely available. And I believe a majority of the player base uses the kind of freely available versions, but it's just something to be aware of. Now, BCP was the most nerve-wracking part of for me. I'm a data scientist at heart, and I was very concerned that if I did something wrong on this, then that could ruin my entire tournament experience because of something being wrong in a list or in a submission. So here's a few things to be aware of. So when you download BCP, you'll create an account attached to an email address. You will then have a search function, and what you can do with this search function is you can input your location, a range of distance, and a range of times, and then it will list every event that occurs within those times within that distance. Then what you can do is you can click on one of the tournaments, like you might say one I often see, Leodis Games RTT. It'll have its date and then it will have a page that you can click onto. When you click onto it, there will be written details about the event. So how many rounds, what location, what tournament pack, maybe missions, food available. A lot of the information will be on there. If not, it may also have a link to an external website where you can see that. It may have a link to an external tournament pack where you can see that. But this is where the kind of heart and soul of finding tournaments happens. What you will see then, before that, it may be required to purchase a ticket or purchase attendance at these. Make sure you check how you pay for your tournament attendance. A lot of tournaments offer very minor prizes for kind of first, second, and third. But it is important to be aware that you probably will need to pay, and the means of paying will probably be external to BCP. So just things to be aware of. Once you've organised that, contacted the tournament organiser about signing up, etc., you then just hit register. And it will say, please register your email address, your name, and confirm that. And then you will appear in the roster of that event. Once you're on the roster, then you'll be able to look at what other names are submitted and whether they have submitted their list or not. Most tournaments don't let you look at other people's lists until the tournament commences, and so on. Now, normally, so you're all signed up at this point. Now what you have to do is submit your list. So this is the list that you will be playing in all 3, 6, 9 of your games on each day. And what you do is you take the output from battlescribe, copy it to chat text, and then on the submit list, you will just copy paste into there and then submit. And what this does is it has a quick check to make sure that it's in a readable format, and then you have submitted your list. Now, most tournaments have a cut-off deadline for this that could be 1 week, 2 weeks prior to the event deadline, or in the case of most small RTTs, it's like 2 days ahead of time. It will be listed. Be aware of these things so that you know it's when you need to submit what by. Don't worry if there's mistakes. Larger tournaments often have people check random other lists to make sure they're compliant. Smaller tournaments will sometimes allow you to change lists, etc. If you flag it early enough. Just be aware that if you've made an error or anything like that, you can change it. Just speak to your tournament organizer in advance and make sure they're okay with it, etc. Once you have submitted your list, you can then set your faction within BCP. Most people kind of submit it to what they're playing. So as a Sisters player, I will just select Adeptus Sororitas, although I think I can also select Adeptus Ministorum or something like that. This just it's just a very quick track to see what's playing what, etc. Now, BCP is often how tournaments are also managed. So it's got all the lists and all the people that are playing. And with all of those in place, you will then be paired up ahead of a tournament. Or it could be 15 minutes before the round starts. It could actually be 2 days before the round starts in some instances. But you'll be paired up. And at this point, once pairings are live or once the tournament is live and lists are locked, you'll be able to look down the list of players and see what they're playing. And you'll be able to get an idea of what the field looks like. When you get presented with the pairings, so for example, I know my first round opponent is going to be Salamanders, as an example. I can click on their list, which should be a kind of green list icon, and then I'll be able to look down and see what they have submitted. And again, this is one of the reasons it's useful to understand battlescribe, because that's typically the format other people will submit, so that as you learn to read it, you'll be able to read other lists. And what then happens at an event? So you've been given this pairings, you can prepare in advance for however much time you've got. But when you get to the table, you typically have this, not awkward, but just a very standard conversation that both people kind of knows happens, which is like, have you ever played against X before? Have you played against Y? Do you know X, Y, Z? And this is your time to ask questions, clarify rules, and make sure you understand it, everything that's important. So I've got a list of questions here that are things I often like to ask. First one, what does your army do? Broad terms, is it a combat army? Is it a shooting army? What are the special rules attached to it? What does it do? What's its thing? Does it have an all-spec scan? Particularly relevant if you have deep strikes or reserves or anything that allows you to appear in the reinforcement step. The reason this is important is that can be a very big gotcha moment, and knowing what they have access to and what it does, very important. Do you have better than normal Overwatch? Again, most Overwatch is on 6s, but sometimes you can have 5s or 4s, and sometimes you can do it in more than one place. Just very relevant. Or you can have buddy Overwatch, where someone shoots on behalf of the overwatching team. Just an important thing to understand because it allows you to plan your charges accordingly. Do you have any fight last? Relevant for multiple charging. If you can work around the fight last, it means that you can actually assault more effectively. Do you have access to much out of phase damage? Not relevant to me as a Sisters player, but is relevant if you are playing models like Abaddon, Ghazghkull, etc., where having access to out of phase damage could allow bracketing in different circumstances than you would expect. What's the average save profile? Are you like Sisters, T3, 3 up, 6 up, and 3 up save, 6 up invuln save. Then Space Marines, T4, 3 up, no invuln. But then there might be others that have different save categories. Just try to get a feeling, because this will allow you to plan what weapons are best against what profiles. Are there any potential gotchas? Are there any kind of key stratagems I need to know? What second, and this is a big one, particularly for planning, what secondaries does your list give up? So some of the secondaries now are based around killing parts of the opponent's army. So bring it down against vehicles and monsters, assassinate against characters, no prisoners against kind of typically elite or many wounds in an army, and abhor the witch if you have no psyker and they have lots of psykers. So again, being aware of those sorts of things allows you to plan your game a bit more. Then clarify any important rules that could come up. So I mentioned about salamanders. One of the things I confirmed in that match before we played was, if neither of us are touching terrain and I charge you from behind it, am I correct in thinking that you would not be able to overwatch me because you cannot see me? He confirmed that he could not, and therefore we were both on exactly the same page with regards to, I'm probably going to try to charge from behind terrain. Similarly, it was things like, how does your buddy overwatch work in those questions? Checking terrain, again, very important. Know what the keywords are. Know whether it has obscuring, doesn't have obscuring, what height it is, what can hide where, can you move things behind it. These are all things to check before the game begins. Then the game starts. You've checked everything, game is set up, play. I would recommend each player recording the scores in some way. Some people use an application for it. I'm old-fashioned. I like pen and paper. I like being able to write it down. Just important to keep track of it. Then at the end of the game, you use the BCP app again to submit these results. And what you do there is you open it up, you click on the pairing, and it will say who went first, who went second, what were the scores of each player, and then submit. It's typically good etiquette for whoever is submitting it to write it out, show it to the opponent, confirm they agree, and then hit submit. And then what will happen is Once all of it's submitted, the tournament organizer will collate all this and then pair the next match, and everything rinses and repeats over again. And that's broadly how a tournament is run using the apps. This will happen 3 times a day. You can go back and look at historic information. You can look at who you're playing, who they played, etc., etc. It's actually a really smooth process. This is the bit I was most concerned about, because from a card gaming background, often this is entirely on the side of the tournament organizer, but having the actual app ourselves and being able to see the information made it much simpler and much more straightforward. That should be everything covering the apps that could be used in a 40k event. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of what it will look like, the kind of practicalities of it. As I said, I created this as a kind of like, I'd find something like this useful. Hopefully others will. So if you have found it useful, if you would like to know more, please do feel free to like, subscribe, leave comments, etc. on other things you'd like me to cover to try and help you understand things in a better process. I'll keep trying to put things up, but just let me know if there's anything else that you think would be appropriate. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening, and next week I'll be back talking about the preparation for the event. So thank you very much, and see you then.